So I'll go ahead and jump in. My inspiration during design projects is oftentimes drawn from the lived experience expressed by, the most impacted people who interact with that site. It's also, I'm also inspired by biomimicry. I really like to adapt design processes to natural processes that exist in the environment, so whether that's, designing a, a biotome using shapes that you can see in design or like a flower shape, um, designing based off of function that you see in the environment, for example, like the water cycle, for example. So again, biomimicry and lived experience is oftentimes where I draw my inspiration from. So I will go ahead and pass it to Ahmed.
I don't really have like a specific artist. I kind of just so what I did for my last project in studio, I looked at the surrounding decoration for structures nearby. I know like they had like a scrub oak emblem for the bridge, and then for my site, I had scrub oak be a design basis in general for the design of the pauses I did for the shape. For that, I did different parts of the scrub oak in life stages, like the sapling, the leaf, the acorn, the sprouting flowers, and then the tree itself. And then alongside that, I looked at the city for how the residents also did murals all over, and I wanted to bring that in the site as well. So then I had handball courts where the walls would be then painted with whatever the residents themselves would want. But otherwise, I don't really have a set style.
Awesome, awesome. And that's definitely what I was going for, Ahmed. Sometimes, like for example, the design process, you definitely want to identify design precedents, design examples that you're drawing inspiration from. But for this conversation, we definitely want to keep it open, right? And it can be, conversations with your parents. That can be a point of inspiration. So thank you for sharing, Ahmed. Nawi, let's go to you.
Yeah, a lot of my inspiration when it comes to like coming up with designs, oftentimes comes from nature. Usually I feel like a lot of patterns, forms, strategies, I feel like we can learn a lot from nature just by studying the way the water is flowing through a space, by the way plants are arranged, by specific patterns in geological formations. I feel like, yeah, nature is my biggest inspiration when it comes to what do you call that? Drawing architectural inspiration.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Nawi. Let's go to you, Alma.
Yes, I agree with Nawi. I don't have a specific way to draw my inspiration, but yeah, I really relies a lot with nature uh, to take all the inspiration that I need. Or sometimes I just look in the internet now that we have that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Alma. Let's go to you, Eduardo.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I would say I draw inspiration from what I see in person and like what works and what brings people together the most, and maybe even things that I see like online that would be pretty cool to see around me.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Eduardo. Let's go to you, Massimo.
Yeah, I find inspiration by either researching it or seeing things around me and different designs and kind of incorporate it in ideas of my own.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Aranza?
I draw inspiration from probably the most like trying to allude to like culture, the culture of the people that are going to use the space, and then also just trying to make it so it's functional but like sustainable. Like I like those styles where it's like useful and also like brings people together. I think someone mentioned that.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Aranza. Let's go to you, Joshua.
Sorry, what was the question again?
The question is, where do you draw your architectural design inspiration from?
For me, I'd say probably my inspiration would have to come from usually some public spaces or maybe private that kind of incorporate some basic shapes or just kind of play around with natural shapes to kind of create these interactive uh playgrounds or I think one maybe one example would probably become from Lawrence Halprin because looking at his work, he plays a lot with like gestures and shapes of spaces to kind of how to say it, like emphasize more on like a more of an experimental design for anyone kind um to kind of use like these spaces however they want instead of just being direct or narrow.
Thanks for sharing that. And that is really cool. Just again, looking at different shapes and how you can adapt the site to it, or sometimes a site has a different shape and being able to adapt to the site. Thanks for sharing that, Josh. Let's go to you, Ayana. And we are answering the question, where do you draw your architectural inspiration from when you design?
Yeah, so first I look at like nature and natural shapes and patterns, like maybe the flow of water or the pattern on a leaf. And also I like art a lot, so a lot of different mediums from art, I pull that from there, and music too, because music's one of key parts of my life. So yeah, music, art, and nature.
Thank you for sharing that, Ayana. I really appreciate you identifying music because that's more of an audio way of gaining inspiration. And oftentimes we see inspiration as only visual. And so that's a great medium to use for inspiration. Thanks for sharing that. Let's see, who has not? Hugo, have you shared yet?
No.
Go ahead and jump in there.
Um, for me, it's kind of like a lot like from like ex life experience. I think um I've just like put myself out there like on certain like occasions. And I'm very like introverted, but like at the same time, it's like I kind of like want like new experiences, and it's like you could always like I think it was I can't remember if it was like music or just like landscape architecture that says like it never stops. I think it was a professor from like community college says like it never stops. It's like just because you're not in school, it's like it's just like you're always like listening or taking pictures or like exploring some different places, and it's constantly you're always like getting inspired by like a structure, by like people, by something someone said. It could be like very very small, and you could like that could like inspire you to like get an idea. So it's like that's I just like drive from everywhere.
Thank you for sharing that, Hugo. And it is definitely important to be vulnerable, right, in design. because being vulnerable, it allows you to connect to the site and the people that'll be using the site better, and really connecting it to your lived experience and how sometimes our desires allow us to relate to, let's say, an impacted stakeholder's desires in context of a site that we're designing. So thanks for sharing that, Hugo. Jonathan, I see that you just jumped in. We are sharing about our design inspiration. So when we're designing our landscapes, where do we draw inspiration from? So feel free to share yours. And then we'll move on.
And so it's for landscape inspiration. Oh,
Correct.
Because I wasn't there on the field trip, and it's for field trip, based on the field trip inspiration, or
Yeah, no, it's just in general.
oh, in general,
Uh-huh.
landscape. Yeah, give me a minute. Okay, so landscape, I can come up with it's urban design, because I was grew up in Asia and in a crowded city, and the residential area and the commercial area mostly integrative, yeah, very narrow. The street is more narrow than the American does. So I mean, the landscape is more inspiring. And there is more old town. They have to update to meet, because most of the building there is outdated, and they need to remodel or reconstruct to another new buildings. And when the government do that, their conflict always be the indigenous people there, who don't want to move to other place, and but their building needs to update, and so there's many conflicts there. So for landscape, I can tell is the most thing I can tell is urban design and how to solve the conflict, like between the outdated and the modern building, how to update the urban urban building.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that, Jonathan. I really appreciate what you're bringing up, because it really is aligned to a lot of the sustainability components that I'm passionate about. And hopefully you all are taking away from this experience as well. You want to navigate, I really mitigate the challenge of what you're communicating, Jonathan, which is the current need for retrofitting or upgrades or updates in context of like cultural needs, as well as impacted people impact, like the impact of design or initiative may have on impacted people. You mentioned indigenous people, you mentioned people who've been, living in a certain area for a long time. And although there's challenges that may come up, like, the capacity of a building to withstand storms or earthquakes, and then that interfering with, like, let's say someone being able to stay in a home. How does government, especially when they come into play in those scenarios, mitigate some of the needs expressed by the impacted stakeholders, like style, like access, like cultural relevance of design, And how does that then connect to retrofitting up against new zoning requirements and regulations for new buildings or buildings that need to be taken down to fit regulations? So I really appreciate that. And then having an awareness of those conflicts and allowing those conflicts to inspire the type of design you developed is some great foresight, Jonathan. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate the thoughts everyone expressed. Did everyone get a chance to share? Make sure I got sound on. So we've been reading Black Landscapes Matter. And some of you have already turned that assignment in. Thanks for those of you who have done that. Let's see. I don't know if this is going to work with me the way I desire it to work with me. Let's see. Let's see. Giving me the white screen. But you know what? It's all good. So give me 1 second. Working with the dilemmas of technology right now. Let's see.
If you're shopping for your first rental property, then you definitely need our free rental analysis calculator.
All right, thank y'all for your patience. So this is a video of Toni Morrison speaking to an interviewer regarding one of her books. And it really speaks to some of the components that we'll be discussing today in class, as well as some of the things that have come up in your reading.
It's always shocking.
And you all?
And I insist on being shocked. I'm never going to become immune. I think that's a kind of failure, to see so much of it that you die inside. I want to be surprised and shocked every time.
You have in your writing certainly marginalized whites. Why are they of no particular interest to you, or seemingly no particular interest?
Well, I was interested in another kind of literature that was not just confrontational, black versus white. I was really interested in black readership. And I wanted to do, I think, for me, the allegory or the parallel is black music, which is as splendid and complicated and wonderful as it is, because its audience was within its primary audience. The fact that it has become universal, worldwide, anyone, everyone can play it, and it has evolved, is because it wasn't tampered with and editorialized within the community. So I wanted the literature that I wrote to be that way. I could just go straight to where the soil was, where the fertility was in this landscape. And also, I wanted to feel free not to have the white gaze in this place that was so precious to me, which is the work.
And you will maintain this safe place for yourself, for your art? You don't think you will ever change and write books that incorporate white lives into them substantially?
I have done.
In a substantial
Paradise.
way?
You can't understand how powerfully racist that question is, can you? Because you could never ask a white author, when are you going to write about black people? Whether he did or not, or she did or not. Even the inquiry comes from a position of being in the center.
And being used to being in the center.
And being used to being in the center. And saying, you know, is it ever possible that you will enter the mainstream? It's inconceivable that where I already am is the mainstream.
Oh no, that wasn't the implication of my question. I think you are very, very much in the mainstream. It's a question of the subject of your narrative, whether you want to alter the parameters of it, whether you see any benefit in doing that, or will you clearly see disadvantages in doing it from your own point of view?
Artistic disadvantages. There are no pluses for me. Being an African-American writer is sort of like being a Russian writer who writes about Russia, in Russian, for Russians. And the fact that it gets translated and read by other people is a benefit. It's a plus. But he's not obliged to ever consider writing about French people or Americans or anybody.
When we were talking earlier about you being or not being in the mainstream, you are sure in the mainstream when it comes to public acclaim.
I can't tell you how satisfying it is to know that I have earned a readership that is that large, as large as it is. I stood at the border, stood at the edge, and claimed it as central, and let the rest of the world move over to where I was.
And this grand thing, the Nobel Prize.
That's grand.
I imagine it is a wonderful thing to receive. Does that alter people's attitudes towards you?
Sometimes, yes. Oh, yeah. All prizes do, but particularly that one. Sometimes they respond to you as though you weren't a person, as though everything you said was sort of capable of being carved into marble. It was so stunning, a surprise to me. I felt very representational. I felt American for probably the first time in my life. I felt representative of all African Americans, and I felt hugely a woman receiving this prize, because that's not too common in the halls of the Nobel, alumni. So I felt all those things, knowing full well, as one always does, that no prize has ever made it easier. You still have to look at that blank page, and all of that was always going to be my problem.
Leaving all of that to one side, the publicity and all the rest of it, the acclaim, do you these days sit back when you're writing, read over a phrase that you've just written and say, my God, that's beautiful?
Occasionally. I'm aware of what's very beautiful, things that I think came off really well. And I'm also aware of the sentences that I have written that at last I know how I should rewrite them, even long after the book's been published.
Toni Morrison, it's been great. Pleasure meeting you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I just really, 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 really love hearing Toni Morrison speak. She speaks so poetically, like she's freestyling, writing a book every interview. It's just really amazing. But one of the reasons why I wanted to share that clip is because You know, as I can grow in this career of policy and urban design equity, I really see a lot of the way that Toni Morrison has laid out this context of American literature and the way that it centers whiteness and how people of color, particularly Black people, become an object in their definition of their own whiteness and defining the hierarchy based off of the Black subject. There's a book that she wrote called Playing in the Dark. It's a really great read, but it really does align in a lot of ways to what you all read in Black Landscape Matters, really centering Black ideas, the Black landscape, the needs of the Black end user into the landscape as a way to not only address the needs of the Black community, but there's an old saying that says a rising tide lifts all boats. And so by prioritizing the most marginalized, you create an environment that's accessible for everyone. And so some of you have started to submit your assignments for the reading, but I did want to take time and have a conversation about some of these concepts through our discussion questions. Before we get into those questions, what were some of the things that stood out to you from the video that we just watched? Feel free to volunteer, but as you all know, I like to call on folks.
I could probably get one.
Go ahead.
Just kind of one thing I did pick up from the video was in sense of like the African American leadership, which most of the time is not read or heard of through some of the literatures or works, because it's often like, how you say it, it's like very faded or like somewhere around the grayscale that's not really mentioned, especially in like in the architecture field, because most of these designs were so inspired by like the picturesque or like the most European work, or like possibly like in other nations, or like UNESCO too, for example. But sometimes you don't really hear much of like some architectural or like even cultural significance of like the African American community, because especially how like in its history they just been seen more as like really just like it's just very diminishing that they don't really get mention of like, so like just it's just their history is very diminishing. It's just what over time what they had to go through.
Yeah, you know, and it's really prevalent in a lot of urban spaces because they're really showing a lot of the values that are represented in context of people of color, Black folks, Native American folks, right? And how they are expected to exist in landscapes that are very violent, right? Violent to their social determinants of health, because of the industries that are built around them, the air quality and pollution that comes as a result, and the, again, consequential health outcomes that it has for the folks that are in proximity of that industry build out. A lot of that is determined by a lot of policies and zoning codes, and we'll talk about that in a future lecture. But how these design decisions impact people of color is very consequential. And a really big challenge of that is the lack of agency to sometimes address those. So I'm gonna go ahead and have somebody else volunteer, share their thoughts of what's coming to mind from the video we just watched of Toni Morrison. One of the things that stood out to me was how she called out the interviewer for being racist. And then also some of the language that Toni Morrison used was centered around landscape, right? She mentioned the word landscape, she mentioned the word soil, right? And so it was really interesting to hear her compare her experience in literature and how she's received as a Black author. I wonder how you all experience or expect to experience your identity in context of your career as a designer, and how that will, you know, impact it in a positive or negative way. Like, how are you all thinking of that? And one of the things that Toni Morrison mentioned is the tokenizing of her in a space that was absent of many intersections of her identity, right? And so she mentioned being a Black person, she mentioned being a woman. And so how does your identity impact the way that you design or your designs are received? Let's go to you, Tade.
Sorry, Professor, I just joined the end of the like videos. I couldn't watch the more details of it.
But although you didn't watch the video, thinking about some of the things that I mentioned, what comes to mind for you?
Can you say again? I'm sorry.
So I was referring to how the video was mentioning the relationship between literature and landscape architecture in context of soil. So the type of language and relationship she had as a, like, in her intersection of identity. So how does your identity and the intersections of it impact the way that you design?
To be honest, I don't have any idea so far, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, maybe just thinking about maybe like how you grew up or cultural awareness, like how you influence, how does those type of things influence your designs in regards to the values that you hold?
About my culture or something, I just grew up to, I just have to compare with landscape, you mean?
Yeah. So like there's all of the things that you learn from school. You learn the math of it all. You learn different concepts to apply. You learn different processes to design through, right? But
Yeah.
how do you show up within your own identity and your design? And is it through your values? Is it like cultural awareness that you put? Is it, you know, thinking about how you've experienced design in the past? Does that influence how you develop design for the future?
So if I want to design in a place or something, I just first of all I just like see the like environment. Like if I want to design a place, I will see the first like the area, like the people and everything. If they don't have a, they have a, maybe they have some lack of like environment for the park or whatever is depend also. Because since my major is landscape architecture, I try to lose more landscape to trees and everything. But even I just have to research more about the place to see if I can use more some details. And I also sometimes I just want to like use like a mix the cultural things like a landscaping and also like a you know just mix everything to just build a new, I don't know how can I say, a new like a landscape design. Yeah, I guess I would say that. I don't know.
Okay, so sometimes like going into a site, you really intentionally switch it up so that it's not like a typical design. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yeah. If even just we went to the LA mission, the shelter. First the things I told you that day, it was my first time I've been that LA mission because I've been in a private shelters and everything. They were very different. But when I walk in there and I talk with the staff and the coworkers, like they said a lot of things they need to do. So they said we don't have like they need some landscape, they need for the rooftop, they need a more trees, they need a more like a comfortable chairs to sit down. So that's why in my opinion, if I want to design some places, I need to go to that site to understand to hear them and understand what they need. And based on that, I'm gonna like design it.
Thank you for sharing that, Tade. That's really important, right? Really connecting to the specific site and their needs is a very powerful interpretation. But like you mentioned, that oftentimes isn't the traditional design approach. Oftentimes, designers have historically superimposed their interest onto a site, right? A lot of European cultures brought the wide prairie grass fields of Europe into America, where a lot of places it just does not work, right? And so, yeah, let's go to you, Christian. There's some questions here to help guide your response, but thinking about the video that we just watched, you can respond to any of these questions. What role does Blackness play in literature and landscape architecture? How does literature and urban design influence anti-Black rhetoric and inform American identity related to other people of color and immigrant communities? How do cultural constructs facilitated through literature influence the architectural imagination? So like when we're reading these books in school, like Huckleberry Finn, how does that impact our imagination on this idea of the American identity or architectural imagination, and how is anti-Blackness or otherness written into the architectural landscape? Whichever of those questions resonate most with you, feel free to respond to.
Okay, well, just like today, I got here late, so I didn't get to watch the video, but the how does literature and urban design influence anti-Black rhetoric and inform? I would say that there's a lot of like his previous history, such as like gentrification, not gentrification, what's it called? Redlining that has existed in the past, where they primarily focus on what areas are least beneficial to build in, and that's where kind of the systemic racism begins, where planners use redlining to like dictate where people will grow up. So like redlining just means that they pick obviously the people of color and minorities to live there instead of the rich and affluent people. So I guess that's how I think literature and urban design influence anti-Black rhetoric, because they literally get to choose where people end up staying and living and through generations.
Thank you for sharing that, Christian. Aranza, any of those questions resonate with you? You'll be the last person to respond before we move on.
Yeah, so how is anti-Blackness, otherness written into architectural landscapes? I don't know if I understood the question very well, but I just noticed that in rich neighborhoods, they have really nice big parks, and somehow in my neighborhood growing up, Mexican, and my Hispanic community, we didn't really have really nice big parks and or parks that got taken care of with maintenance. So I think there's a big gap between the two in quality.
And it says something, right? Like it's like why are our parks like this? But when I go over here, it's well cleaned, well maintenance. They have a pond with water in it versus our pond that's been empty for the last 5 years, right? Really seeing those different outcomes in context of site and who gets to use the site. It really speaks to anti-Blackness or anti-otherness and how it's written into architectural landscapes. Another thing you'll see is the wideness of the street, right? And so you'll see in a lot of urban areas, streets are more narrow and have more dips. I hate dips. I don't know if y'all are people that hate dips, but like it's really frustrating to just try to drive and have to hit those dips. And it's like, well, who designed this street? So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Aranto. Thank you all for your responses.
I want to add to that a little bit.
Please.
Yeah, so like Aranza was saying, those urban areas with how they're constructed are very different from the rich communities and predominantly white communities. And like the question, it says something about inform. I'm not really sure if I'm going along the lines of the question, but it did remind me of something that like it basically tells like me as a Black woman, it basically tells other cultures and other like people of color about like maybe like my community, like Black people. So it informs other cultures how one other culture is, and then we're pivoted towards each other instead of the real problem. I don't know if I made much sense there.
That's spot on. That is spot on because a lot of times people of color have very similar experiences and the root cause is very similar. But like you're mentioning, Ayana, oftentimes the social dynamics play out to where the most marginalized communities have in-group fighting versus collaborating to address the root cause, which may be advocating for a more equitable design or more equitable policy, more economic outcomes, more better health outcomes. And oftentimes there's this idea that there's one pie, and if I get a piece of the pie, I'm taking your piece. Versus, look, we're all dealing with the same system, and the system needs to work well for all of us, and that's what we need to advocate for. And that's oftentimes lost. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, Ayana.
Thank you. Thank you for getting what I was trying to say.
Most definitely. Hugo, I see that you want to speak on this.
Yeah, I'm kind of like just like growing up. Like I'm probably gonna go with like what role does Blackness play in literature and landscape architecture. I feel like I'm very like passionate about like because it's like I grew up. It's like what role does it play? It's like it plays. And it's like I feel like we're like very much like I'm just like talking about like minorities in general because it's like we're 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 pretty much like the underdog that's like the stereotypical like landscape architect is white and it's like and I've heard like so much of like Black women like women in general like minorities everyone that's like they have to like work twice as hard just to prove themselves and it why is it like to other people it's like it just like brush it off like okay like you didn't do it too well and it's just like for minorities it's like no you're supposed to work harder and sometimes like you have to double check like how you're doing just to prove yourself and just to like show that you can actually do the work and it's like for like it all depends also like on income levels and on like your neighborhood because like one class like I took like it combines psychology with landscape architecture and it says like in like Mexican neighborhoods, black neighborhoods. It's like back in the day when there like certain play areas were being established, it was just like metal bars and there was like no shade or anything. It was just like that in the middle of nowhere. And it's like in for white neighborhoods, they were really fancy and it's like it wasn't like the fanciest ones, but they had better protection. And it's like I think it's just like here's whatever like we want to give you. And it's like why is it like they get better things and like for minorities, it's like we just get whatever is left over.
This is so true. And you'll see this too play out in regards to how like policy is developed and why, you know, what you all are learning here in this course is participatory design, because oftentimes decisions are made without the input of the most impacted communities. And you'll see in communities of color, engagement is sometimes like a checkbox, a survey, a quick touch point with the community, but not really engaging them in the decision making. And so you all are learning how to facilitate a design process through community engagement. That's important because oftentimes, again, communities of color aren't engaged in that way. However, when you go to more affluent communities, they are very active in the decision making that happens in their communities. There's parts of LA County, like South Pasadena, for example, they have ordinances that prevented freeways from being developed in their community, that prevented multifamily dwellings from being built in their neighborhoods, right? And so a lot of that came from people advocating, leveraging their self-advocacy to prevent policy implementation. That same advocacy can be leveraged in communities of color, but it has to be facilitated a different way, because it's not just about generating money and throwing money at an issue, but rather generating people power, right? Yes, Christian, thank you for putting that in the chat. NIMBY, not in my backyard. So a lot of their policy advocacy is to prevent people of color, people from low income class statuses from living in their communities. However, that doesn't stop them from hiring them to do maintenance, to work in restaurants and so on and so forth to generate economy in their community, but they don't want them living there. And so this paradox of values is something that oftentimes we have to push back on, because say, for example, if someone is working in West LA, but they live in South LA, that's a very challenging route. But because of gentrification, because of disparities as far as cost of living in different parts of the city, they have to live well away from where they work, because there's not an opportunity for them to live in West LA in an affordable house. So these disconnects in needs and how our not only policies, but also our built environment is creates barriers for people of color, for women, for non-binary queer folks, right? Navigating a lot of the built environment and policy is challenging. And so as landscape architects, you want to be having these considerations in mind. So what questions should you be asking? You want to have a context for the historical context of the site. And with that, you can start to answer the question, what is the purpose of the site? Whose story is the site telling? Who is being denied or granted access, and how? In what ways can the site be reimagined through a landscape intervention? And so these are the questions we asked ourselves on our site visit this past Saturday. Some of you all did not get to attend, but there are photos and videos posted in the field trip folder. So definitely make sure you take a look at those so that you can complete the response questions for the site visit. Does anyone know what this bird is?
No clue.
No clue.
Uh,
Well, this is the Sankofa bird, and it's a bird that comes from African tradition, and it speaks to the importance of looking back to go forward. And so the Sankofa bird, as you can see, is looking backwards, and it's really about looking at the past to understand where we're going. And that can be learning from the past, from the values that we want to carry forward, but it also is about learning from the mistakes as well, right? So that we don't repeat them in the future. So again, this bird is a powerful symbol in African tradition, but it's also a message in context of our course in making sure that when we're doing our site design, that it's reflective of historical context of a site. So we've been talking a lot about what needs to be centered in a landscape design. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about stating is that the people, environment, and landscape are always present. Those three things are always present. There's never a moment in time that we're not taking in people, environment, and landscape, right? So we have this cycle, this relationship that we're stuck into, right? Where the plant renatures the land, conserves the open lands, earth, countries develop environmental protections, and then people, everybody has access to the local grown plants, supposedly, right? But this intertwined relationship, another way to look at this too is everything that we experience, whether it's our bed, our tables, our lamps, it has to come from nature, right? The materials are manufactured into goods that we can sell, but everything starts from nature, and it has to be manufactured by the people in order to do that. So again, that's another relationship that we're locked into. The way that we leverage the landscape to facilitate that, though, right, is a big part of the world and the earth, and the way that we have to leverage the earth to do it, and we're impacting the earth. So when we're talking about how we're manufacturing goods and how we're developing the world around us, that's impacting the earth, but we're not always conserving open lands because we're developing concrete infested urban cities. I was just reading an article the other day talking about how the city of New York is built on landfills, which were originally swamps and waterways, creeks, and rivers. And so now the city of New York, these massive skyscrapers, tons and tons of weight loads are built on these marshes that are sinking inches every year. So when we're not thinking about our development for a long-term perspective, we're oftentimes impacting the conservation of open lands, and also that we're impacting the conservations of our own urban environments. At some point, we're going to have to evolve to a place where we can retrofit a lot of what we built to be more aware of the impact on the earth and the environment. So access is denied through design. But in order to deny it through design, you have to authorize it through policy. And so a lot of what you all will bump up against are what you desire to do with your design projects and what you're allowed to do with your design projects. And so the way that you'll develop a framework to ensure that you're, in compliance and you are aware of your guardrails is that you build awareness of the design constraints. This is something that we've been learning a lot about this semester. So political constraints, social constraints, environmental constraints, economic constraints, right? So you want to have awareness of the constraints, but you also want to be aware of your values, your values, your values, your values, right? And so we've been learning about our permaculture design principles. This is a big part of how I'm hoping you all will move forward in your school careers and professional careers with understanding your values and context of your designs. So we know our ethics are rooted in people care, earth care, and fair share, right? And the work that we are committed to, as best as we're able, we want to make sure that we're facilitating land and nature stewardship. We want to facilitate the equitable development of the built environment. We want to leverage tools and technology. We want to leverage culture and education. We want to facilitate health and spiritual well-being. We want to leverage and be aware of finance and economics and how they relate to our site designs. And we want to facilitate land tenure and community governance. And that partly is how we construct the site, how easy it is to maintain, right? All of these things that we intend to do in context of our values can be done by aligning our intention to the 15 permaculture design principles, right? The 15 principles of permaculture design. I won't go over those because we've been doing it in class a lot, but I want you all to be aware of it because it's a big part of the values that we are infusing into our site design. Any questions on our values and how it relates to this challenging relationship people, the environment, and the earth are intertwined in? I'm gonna ask a question related to that, right? Because there's competing interests, right? We're talking about the manufacturing of goods. We have this robust economy that's rooted in this market that projects profits based off of consumption, right? And that profit and consumption cycle is based off of, again, the extraction of natural resources from the environment, which has an impact on people, which has an impact on the earth. We're dealing with climate change. We're also dealing with economic justice issues, right? We've been seeing all of these protests. People are striking in the healthcare industry, in the trucking industry, the transport of goods. Folks are striking, right? All these industries are striking. So how does that relate to our permaculture design principles in context of identifying interventions and solutions? And let's talk about it in the context of landscape, but you can also think of it in other ways as well, if it's easier. How does centering permaculture design ethics and principles impact this relationship people, the environment, and the earth are in? Let's go to you, Jonathan. Jonathan Wu.
Sorry, what was the question?
How does centering permaculture design principles impact this relationship we are in with Earth, right? We're dealing with a lot of challenges right now in context of this relationship. So I mentioned some of them, right? People are quitting jobs en masse. The old 9-to-5 culture and structure is kind of outdated. Folks are striking, right? We have folks in the transportation industry striking, healthcare industry striking, public public government agencies. Some folks are striking from the different unions. We have the environment being heavily impacted, right? Again, we have locations like LA, for example, where we've completely hard bottomed the LA River. It doesn't, deplete water into the LA basin like it used to. Similar to New York, that has all of these underground creeks and waterways. We have a similar issue in LA. It's just that we're not sinking and we're not necessarily on a marsh or a swamp, but we do have areas like that, like Marina Del Rey, for example. That's a marshy area, swampy area that's been developed upon, and there's probably some sinking going on over there. And then bringing it back to Earth, we know climate change is a big problem, right? And we have some mixed matched values in relation to Earth care, people care, and fair share. So the question is, how does recentering permaculture design values and principles impact this relationship between people, the environment, and Earth?
I mean,
and we have all of these visuals, right? Land
Yeah.
stewardship, land and nature stewardship, equity in the built environment, leveraging tools and technology. How is leveraging any of these components using the ethics and principles of permaculture design going to address the challenges we face in our relationship between people, environment, and the earth?
I would say, any of these, just example, or
Yeah, anything that comes to mind for you.
I will mean technology, because
Nice.
yeah, a few years ago I heard about mostly for climate change, for the carbon dioxide from the car emission, most green gas emission from a vehicle, and right now we have advanced EV, so, and people taking, most people like drive even more than like few years ago.
Nice.
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, and the technology is right now we develop a lot, and we keep developing, and yeah, so, and we instead of using like the industrial, like we achieving more goal by using a lot of energy before. We are trying to find a new way, more efficient way to make our goal, but also take care of the environment, I think. I mean, yeah.
Definitely. And that's important, right? And tools and technology adoption is really challenging to manage because a lot of technology is on a cutting edge. It's innovative. No one's seen it before. They've never experienced it before. So policy oftentimes has to catch up to technology. And so I'm glad that you brought that up because we have to do more of a better job with that. AI is a big thing right now, and policy's trying to catch up to that. But also technology can be leveraged to move a lot of this work forward, streamline processes, support comprehension and academic development, right? It also can help with a site, right? And so those that came on Saturday and came to the site visit, we talked a lot about these elements and how they can be infused into the LA mission site as well. So I'm going to let y'all go on break because we'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back. We'll also have a visitor, Georgia Van Kylenberg. She is one of the community stakeholders partnering to inform your site design this semester. Georgia Van Kylenberg is with Archbridge in the Gap, who participated in previous iterations of this. So I'll talk a little bit more about Georgia when she gets on. But before we hear from Georgia, we'll talk about some of these components in context of the LA mission site. But right now, I'll go ahead and give you all a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 7:20 and continue with today's lecture. Hello, Georgia. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Thanks for asking. So we are taking a 5-minute break, and so they'll be back at 7:20.
Oh, great.
What
I'll
I'll
do
do
the
is
same then because I just came straight out of a meeting.
cool deal, cool deal.
Okay, unless you wanted to talk to me while people are on break.
Oh no, that's just fine. I just wanted to give you that heads up. You kind of have a little overview of some pointers of like the conversation, but
Yeah.
I'll introduce you and we'll jump into it. But I'll definitely give you your time.
Perfect. I appreciate you greatly. Talk to you in a second.
Awesome, Georgia. Thanks for coming. All right, let's start coming back. Let me see the thumbs up for folks who are back with us.
I can do it in person.
Awesome. Well, I am so happy to introduce a great friend and colleague and mentor of mine. Georgia Van Kylenberg holds a very dear place in my heart. When I was fresh out of grad school back in 2018, 2017 going into 2018, I met Georgia and we connected through her nonprofit, Arch Bridging the Gap, and I facilitated some of the permitting and zoning requirements for the approvals for the mural projects that we did. Amazing project. It was to do 150 murals, 10 in each council district in the city of LA, and it was in partnership with community, which included youth from the different council districts. I came on initially to support Council District 15, and our project was in partnership with several of the housing projects in LAPD, which was a really awesome experience. And again, that was a life-changing experience, Georgia, and I'm super glad that our paths continue to cross. And I'm glad to introduce you to my students today. Georgia is a lover of all people, an actress, kids TV host, comedian, producer, activist, and philanthropist who has dedicated her life to working with individuals and communities born into an unjust experience of our world, and it's endless and is endlessly inspired by them to spend every day combining her passion for humans, entertainment, education, innovation, and philanthropy to create a thriving future for everyone. She is the founder of the charitable organization Arch Bridging the Gap, Hearts for Community Action in Uganda, and Women's Community Leadership Program in Ethiopia, as well as owner of I Am Spartacus Entertainment. An outspoken advocate for global human rights and ending childhood trauma, she speaks internationally on platforms of child rights, poverty alleviation, youth empowerment, the power of art to create change, and ending homelessness, which is a component of our project this semester. She is also a global advocate for autoimmune condition, alopecia areata, and vocal supporter of mental health awareness and solutions. So a lot of alignment to our social determinants of health components in this course, and just an all around badass, excuse my French. Thank you again, Georgia, for joining us today. Today, you'll be talking to our class about your experience with the project, right? The Sky Farm project. For those that don't know, Georgia has a amazing history with the LA mission and really has been in support of the Sky Farm project for several years now. So I'll hand it over to you, Georgia. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and glad we're sharing space.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful to be here, Ronnell. We actually just finished the 75th mural in that 150 last weekend. And I managed to, look, Ronnell, it's in a cast. Got the cast on today.
Wow.
I managed to fracture my foot badly. So please excuse, I'm just a little bit discombobulated because we're trying to make surgery decisions and all that stuff. And I just came off a board meeting, but I am so grateful to be here. I did get the sort of inside recap from Sandeep, who met you all on Saturday. We had a chat Sunday just to kind of touch base, the two of us, because obviously he got to represent a little bit of the community, the stakeholders at the mission. He is such an incredibly unique human being.
He was being so modest, Georgia, so modest, but so insightful and so helpful while he was with us, for sure.
I'm so glad. But I really wanted to serve you all today as much as I could. there's so much I could tell you about this project, but I want to make sure that what I share goes towards your greater good of learning and where you're at. So I'll just sort of start, and then if people want to raise hands and ask questions, come on video, ask questions, text, I'll open the chat so that I can see it as well, just in case you have questions as we go. And I agree, Hugo, that was a fantastic intro. I hope you make every guest feel that special. Ronnell, I was like, oh, I'm so fancy. So thank you. And it really, I have to tell you guys, like, Ronnell was one of my first interns, and to see him popping up the way that he has in my life since, it just makes everything feel like it sort of makes sense, you know? So I'm so proud of you, Ronnell, in that not condescending way. I promise. Okay, so yes, I've been volunteering at the mission since 2009, and a lot of that volunteering was in the kitchen, half a day a week, spending time with the program individuals, which I think you'd understand now as the residents. So they and I got to know each other very well, and I got to see on a deep level a sort of the things that you don't understand when you sort of drop in for a Thanksgiving, hand over a plate of food sort of stuff. And being in the kitchen with them, I also saw what food was being prepared and what that, I mean, to me, I don't know how deeply you all go into food nutrition and within your work, but it's just not okay that a lot of the time the food that they receive is the leftovers, the almost expired, the expired food. Very few of the gents that I was there, like cutting up veggies, really knew what veggies were. And so I kept on thinking what we know about neuroscience and what brains need to thrive. These people are not getting what they need to thrive. And here we are expecting them to turn their lives around, not just do well tomorrow. And I wanted to find ways to bring them healthy food, but also to have them take part in that experience and to understand where a tomato comes from and where the things they were cutting up and, you know, serving or eating comes from. They always had a salad bar. Pre-pandemic, there was always a salad bar. I'm not sure if it's there all the time anymore, but I was looking at ways to do a garden farm at the mission in some way. Had come across aeroponic towers, and by some chance was at the environmental charter school doing a tour and bumped into a woman who became a dear friend who actually owned those towers. And I'd reached out to her and she'd reached out to the mission, and no one had got their emails. So immediately I said, Wendy, you have to come to the mission. You have to meet everybody. We had a big meeting. She brought 3 towers as a gift to the mission to get it started. And we started the rooftop garden with 3 aeroponic towers. I learned very quickly sort of the technology and everything. And we created a vision from that day and that meeting. She brought with her a woman called Laura Doss, who supported her team to win the X Prize, the source. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on their name? That's ridiculous. Sky Source. Thank you. Sky Source was her company. We had this vision that we would bring a water machine to extract water from the air, put it on the air conditioner, use that to put water into the systems, also pull a line down to the street to provide water for individuals experiencing homelessness as a free resource. Because a lot of the time, I don't know if you're aware, but they'll tap into water lines and it can create a lot of problem, because obviously everybody should have access to water, and if they don't, we need it. So we were sort of trying to combat that. There was a proof of concept in Venice that was working, and then we wanted to do solar. So the whole concept was a net positive, not just net neutral, a net positive farm on Skid Row. And my hope was that we would get 150 of those towers. This is back in 2017, and we'd fill it all. And I saw all the pictures online of Wendy's other gardens where there was rows and rows. Now those gardens are quite expensive. So it would come down more to me like every Thanksgiving or Christmas, buying one as my present to myself and giving it to the mission. And we had a couple of donors buy 1 or 2. And then we had an ongoing partnership with Let Us Grow that I won't go into too much because it's certainly not positive vibes. But if it feels relevant, anytime you can ask. They came on board, did a seedling program, helped maintain, and they brought about what you guys saw, all those extra towers that are sort of sitting in the back. They brought all of those, and we sort of thought, oh, we can get going and we can get started. Now, within the whole experience, there were so many challenges. I just felt like every few weeks we were coming across another challenge, whether it was that the electric would go, right, and I wouldn't be there for a week and the electric will have turned off and they didn't restart it and all the plants had died. I could turn up a month later and there was this weird gunky yellow stuff. And for about 6 months, I kept on calling Let Us Grow and the team being like, hey, I think we've got the alkaline wrong, because I'm not sure if you understand yet too much about the towers, but you have to measure the acidity, alkalinity of the water and adjust it. And I was like, I think it must be super alkaline or something. Turned out that somebody was power washing the roof with chemicals. And so they were just killing every plant we put in there because, of course, they were spraying everything. So things like that just continue to happen where it just felt it was pretty flawed. And one of the biggest challenges was I wanted this program to serve the community. So the men and hopefully eventually the women, but it's on that side and there's challenges with cross visiting. So we wanted the men to manage the garden. We trained them up. We trained a number of them up how to do it. It was meant to be something where for them, they get to, on a metaphorical level, but like for many of them, they've sort of feel like discarded, a seed or a plant that really hasn't gone where they wanted to. And the idea for me was like, you can watch this little seed get nutrients and it becomes like a lettuce that you take down and it becomes beautiful and it becomes something we photograph and we celebrate and that you provide down to the kitchen and the kitchen uses it. And just like you mightn't see the potential, but if you keep doing this, and it worked for a couple of people. Michael graduated, Rick graduated, Harold graduated. That didn't go as well. And Bob, I think Bob and Richard are the best examples. Both of them had been incarcerated for a significant amount of time. Bob for 32 years. And he started working on the farm with us, and he was already doing pretty well, but he reunited with his daughter who was born when he went into jail, and he now lives with her and is like grandpa of the year. And he and I are still like family. I love him to pieces. And same with Rick. I've met Rick's mom and I know the whole families, because when they got this experience, it is this sense of like, I have a responsibility. I have something to do. Now, as you may have had shared with you at the mission, not everybody's path at the mission is a positive one. There's quite a big fallout rate, I guess, or, people choose to step out of the program or do something to cause them to be removed, or a lot of the men would bring a lot of their anger and frustration to the roof, and sometimes we'd have to ask them to not join the program today, and then shame would build and they maybe wouldn't come back even though we welcomed them back. So having the literal manpower to look after it became a big problem. And Rick and Bob both graduated and were looking after it as like their love, because it's so calming when the water's flowing through them. It's so rewarding, and you get to bring produce down to the kitchen, that they just did it out of a pure love. Rick actually spent hours every day cleaning those towers with his bare hands and a Brillo pad. He was so proud of them. And I can share photos at any time that feels right, along the process, if you need them for presentations or just out of interest. I have Google Drive folders full of photos of this project. Now we had, and this becomes, I think, starts getting important, all this rambling. We had realized that if we wanted to have the 150 towers, even if we wanted to do, say, 75 and do the second half for like a seedling program, and then some of the other conversations like a meditation area, whatever, it's such an uneven flooring that we had talked about with Lincoln Property West, who were at the time a company that had volunteered with us to paint the murals, which I'll talk about in a second. And they had sort of put forward a quote or like what we could do for bare bones of raising the floor, putting on basically like a decking that would take away a lot of the weight in the middle, because it would be braced around the edges. You could run the hoses, you could run the electric, you could run everything underneath, so there's no tripping hazards. And that was one of the bigger, like, it's not look as great to have all the hoses out there being thrown around. So as a way to sort of make it safer, make it more structurally sound, and make it prettier, let's put a terrace flooring. Now that didn't quite get through the whole system, and it was a pity because they were basically going to volunteer and do it as an in-kind donation. We've had a lot of tripping along the way with LA Mission admin. I don't think I need to go into too much detail. I prefer not to unless it feels important. And that was one of those where that didn't end up happening. And then we had new administration at the mission, and that also changed things because priorities were different. I sort of had free reign to the mission, and then things changed a little bit and just became a bit harder. And then the pandemic happened, and that made it harder because you weren't even allowed down there. So of course the program ended during the pandemic, and there was cross communications between the kitchen and the admin as to using the produce. And then we started again, sort of. And then there was some unfortunate things that happened with leadership there that made me kind of go, I'm going to pause on this, because a lot of energy, time, money, worry, concern has gone into this, and I'm not sure this is the time. So I paused, and a couple of months ago, as you all know, because you're a part of the party now, we've been reinventing this conversation and seeing, with your help and with the more sort of robust, I think people are really getting, aware of the need for urban agriculture. It's becoming a priority point for funding, all that sort of thing. So we're sort of here, we're like, hey, we're here, ready to go when you are. We've been doing this for a while. But to answer some of the other questions, that the murals, for example, that happened through Arts Bridging the Gap. That was something that I mean, honestly, it was more as like a PR thing at the start for me, and wanting to do something else to uplift that space for mindfulness. I'm a big neurobiology mindfulness person, and know the value of creating spaces to reset neural pathways and things. So when I looked at that space, I was like, it's not really that inviting, because if you can imagine, before it was all just gray wall and gray floor. So we just bit by bit, we painted the one that is on the south side first, did that when it was just 8 towers, and then we did the 2 closest to the 8, and then we did that final piece with I was the artist on the first one, Sky was the artist on the second one, and so all ABG artists. We had volunteers come and we painted, and we had community members, residents come paint. And my hope was, and still is, that big wall that is sort of much taller, where hopefully the solar will go, eventually we can paint a mural that sort of honors all the partners and is a fun collaborative, because all our murals are always collaborations and community paint days. It's not some fancy artist comes in and paints. I think that I'm going to round up on the questions, and then I'll just basically throw it to you all to hit me with whatever's going to help you. I hope that I've answered about the role. I'm basically been PM, if that feels, being the project manager, but I guess also sort of the project manager is the person that just keeps bugging everybody and keeps making it happen. But also trying to be a bit more realistic with partners. Ronnell and I have experienced that a bit, where it's okay for us to be, on calls, but I've really managed the partnerships recently. There's a couple of other people that I don't want to continue to bring into calls until we have something concrete. So I've been that partner management. I've been the project manager. I've been the gardener at different times, that when you have a grassroots project, you do everything. To answer your question around the design features and elements, there's always been a hope for me that we could have a I want to say like a multifaceted garden, that it wasn't just an aeroponic garden, that we showed people multiple forms of urban agriculture, raised beds, even using aeroponics on a horizontal. Because when I was in Lebanon, I saw these PVC pipes that were working just the same as ours, and they were just put together by kids. And I think opening people's minds to what can be a source of food propagation, and also to make it feel nice, like plants play their purpose in a happy space. I had originally looked into a bee grant to see if we could do some bee related stuff. I've also been pretty keen to, within the raised beds, look at bringing people home, so to speak, to the Three Sisters form of agriculture, seeing if there was a way to do squash, corn, and beans on the roof to really teach like primitive, this is how food can be made in a complete circle, and you can do it down here. I think what excites me so much about this project, and Ronnell, I'm grateful for you having me on because it reminds me why I do this amongst all the challenges we have, to have a net positive project, like environmental project on Skid Row of all places, right? Like you were there this weekend, you saw what its surroundings are like. And I love those people, but they are so challenged and they are so misunderstood and so judged. And so many people in our community will never go down there just because of the name. And so to put a project that is net positive, that feeds the electric in the building, that brings water to people not even related to the project, and then also waters the project, to have food that is going into the system. The other part of this was my hope, once we had more than 20 towers, was to create a supply chain management style program to teach a bit of enterprise to the program participants so that we could sell them to local restaurants at a like premium, like these are carbon footprint reduced, you're not bringing them in from Oxnard, you're bringing them in from the corner of the street. They were walked over by someone who previously was experiencing homelessness, who is training to learn job skills, and they drop off your produce to the restaurant. You put it on a little placard on the menu, like Mission Mondays, choose the salad that you want from the produce. Like there's so many wins that restaurant gets, the kudos of doing that. We get to tell the story of solutions and empowerment. So there was that, but then also just like food creation for these people has been something that like they don't deserve. Like that's the thought that they have, that they just deserve to survive, if that, right? And I think that you probably felt it when you were up there, although it wasn't a perfect day. I was so sad that it wasn't like the gorgeous sunny day that we usually have when we go up there, although that can be stinky hot when it is, by the way. But when you get up there and the water is running through those towers, like I will tell you, Jaden Smith did an episode with me on that rooftop, and he's like, dude, I want to fund this whole thing. This is the neatest. Like, I want to bring my friends and play music. Like we should, because we used to have Friday socials. So every Friday night I would come with whoever of my friends wanted to come down. I would bake food. They would pull out guitars. A couple of the guys were learning guitar in the program, and a couple of my friends play guitar. And we would literally harvest, and then we'd sit there until the sun went down and play guitar and just be together. Sometimes I'd make them meditate. They hated that. But like we would do things in community. And I think Jaden saw that possibility too, of it just, when it's going and when there's plants everywhere, and there used to be tables out that I bought to like just have us all sit. It's like nothing else in LA. So I'm going to keep hoping. And with your help and your support and your wonderful, innovative ideas that I couldn't even begin to put my brain around, like what you know and what you can bring to this, I really think and I'm not a pie in the sky person. Ronnell knows I'm pretty boots on the ground, but also like a believer. I really know that this project is something that people could be like, well, they did it on Skid Row, so you can do it anywhere. And I think that's really important, because we need movements like this across the world to be able to keep us going. Okay, I'm off the soapbox. I'm done. Question time.
Thank you so much, Georgia. Let's open it up for questions. I know there were several folks who were at the site. I think it was 9 students from the class that were able to participate. So definitely thinking about the site visit or just in general questions and comments that were made by Georgia. What thoughts are coming to mind or questions that you all would want to ask a stakeholder in context of getting insight for your site designs?
I see a hand from Hugo.
Feel free to jump in, Hugo.
Hi. I kind of like got the insight and everything about like people, staff, everything. It's like it was really helpful for people to because like that's kind of like what I really want from like the site, like just like having people's input because it's for them. They're gonna use it, and it's like I kind of wanted to ask what's the drive that you have that's like what is it that like makes you want to like just do it? It's like I don't know how to like exactly word it. I think I got it from like the chef that like he said it's like it's not right that's like people here are getting like leftovers, and it's like they should get better quality food because it all begins with food. And I think the quote is um everything begins with the meal. I think that was somewhat the
Yeah.
quote.
Hope
So
begins with a meal.
yes. So what is it like that drives you to want to help, to want to do something, to it's like because yeah.
Well, it's a big question to answer. So I'll do my best. And thank you, Hugo. Did you meet Eric, the chef? Is
Yes.
that he is one of my favorite people in the whole world. We have been friends forever. I love him so much. So glad you got to meet him. You met a hero that day. What he has been through, I don't know if he told you much about his story, but he is a true hero. So it did start with the similar motivation of like these people deserve to have real food that is going to fuel their brains, fuel their bodies, and help them on their like they've made a choice to make a different choice, right? And if you're getting high fructose corn syrup, if you're getting high sugar foods, or foods that's moldy, or food that is just not nutrition dense, you're already handicapped. So that started it. But then when I sort of saw the possibility of what message we could send both to the community, that are served by the garden, and those people that judge and like there's no solutions, there's nothing you can do. I'm like, well, you could do this. And I'm always looking for different ways to engage Los Angeles community that don't think it's safe to go or whatever they want to say. That was one of my big bummers about how Saturday we didn't get to do it all, because that was a interesting, safe volunteer opportunity to engage with the community experiencing homelessness. So I think it just started taking on a life of its own for me, where how amazing to be a living example of solar and water being extracted from the world and not the grid. And when I saw Michael in our program transform during the process, every time I would come up, he'd be like, look, Georgia, look, it's like, this is the one I planted. He had his own tower called Hercules, and he was so excited, and he got a job at Whole Foods afterwards. And like just seeing him light up, the friendship we created, and just seeing that like he's not very neurotypical, and this just gave him a thing to care about, a thing that he could relate to. Like not all of us find people as our ultimate source of connection, and I think oddly his tower became like a safe place to commune and to do something constructive. And I think that just that vision of people being up there and meditating and doing yoga and being in community and being around. Unfortunately, you guys didn't get to hear the water, but when that water is rushing through the towers, I mean, there's a reason fountains are what they are, right? They chill people out. It's a whole different world to be up there. And with the noise, and now we know everything we do about noise pollution and what that's doing. I mean, I've often said, when you consider people sort of talk about all the things like drugs and mental illness, and I'm like, well, what about like sleep and noise like that trauma for someone living on Skid Row, the noise that you're surrounded by, the stress and trauma, and then you get a chance to go up and be in a garden in your space. I just think everyone deserves that, I think. And so there's Hugo, there's so many different, it's like every different conversation I had is a different inspiration for why. But I hope that that's a few of them. And by the way, it also saves the mission money when it's working at its fullest. We do save the mission money because they do pay for produce. As much as it's sort of believed that all food is donations at these missions, it's not. They have a huge budget for food, because even some of these like almost expired things, they make them still pay for it.
Yes. I believe it was Eric. He mentioned they spend $2,000 a month on produce.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, we could never, I don't think there's a world in which we could replace all the tomatoes and all the cucumbers and all the, like, those are harder to grow. But certainly lettuce, spinach, herbs, all of that sort of stuff.
I have to give a shout out to the folks who were in the kitchen serving on a Saturday, because they hooked us up. They showed us so much love. They made sure that we had a lunch.
Oh, nice.
The sandwich was really good. So if y'all missed out on that, woo.
And it's good food. Like Eric does a good job. I mean, they don't as much anymore, but they used to put on like hot meals 3 times a day. Before COVID, of course, it was so much easier to just like, we don't do that anymore so much.
You all can share reflections as well from Saturday's on-site experience, and Georgia may be able to provide some insight on some of those things as well. We did take a tour of the kitchen. We spoke with Eric. He mentioned the importance that he's placed on nutrition and the importance of having quality food that he's serving. He mentioned how they used to give him sweets and stuff every day, but he's moved that down to 2 or 3 times a week, and really centering healthy food, because it's like, how am I going to prepare food for folks who need it the most, right? And just stuffing them with all types of, like you were saying, corn syrup and fructose and sugars and cakes, and right. And so I really appreciated that. And it was really driven home the power that the previous iteration of the garden served. The farm really was helpful in getting produce into the kitchen. He was mentioning how effective it was. It was like, wow, and he said bundles. He mentioned how much it was.
We would come in literally, like I'd be like, Eric, open the door. And I'd have like this much stuff. And he'd sometimes have to throw it out because he couldn't use it in time.
So yeah, any questions coming up for folks? We have one of the stakeholders, as you all know, we have our landscape analysis tool, our canvas, right? And so we want to know who our champions are.
I see Joshua has his hand up.
Okay, awesome. Joshua,
which actually makes me really happy because my brothers are Hugh and Josh. And so Hugo and Josh both asked questions. I appreciate that.
Just really quick, I think you mentioned already, but I just remember some constraints that they had with some of the previous gardens designs where some of the limited donors that they were working with, and I guess lower numbers in like volunteers. But what sorry, I'm still trying to gather it. What kind of like the people that were volunteering and kind of maintaining and like working with these kind of gardens, what made them feel like discarded or discouraged while doing that kind of work? Did it have to involve with like the kind of plants they had to work with that require like too much maintenance that or was it something else?
Really important question, Joshua. Thank you for asking that. One of the bigger challenges is it was never meant to be a volunteer maintained project. For me, it's a lovely project to have, but if you're not employing or, so all the men in the program have to do like 4 hours of work a day, I think is the minimum. So if you're not using that workforce and training them, they're there, they live there. To me, that we're really missing out on the opportunity to make this their farm, their garden. And I wanted the volunteers to just be like there to support, there to come in and learn. Like, for example, in the kitchen, if I don't turn up on Wednesday, hopefully everyone's deletes because there are men in the program working in the kitchen. And I wanted the farm to have that same mentality. And what sort of, I think, soured partners and volunteers is it sort of was made to feel like it was our job to do it. And I took that on, but it's, 45 minutes to an hour to get there and then another back for me and turning up and seeing that everything was dead because the electric had gone out and no one had checked on it. And it gets pretty disheartening, right? Like, or there was the spraying and I wasn't able to be there and see what was going on or, support from staff to like at least say, oh, I'll go up and check it. Those kind of things felt a little bit frustrating. So I am actually really excited about Sandeep's conversation around monitoring with cameras, and he was talking to me about zipline ideas. I thought that sounded like so much fun. Not for us, for the cameras, just to be clear. Although a zipline would be fun once I fix my foot thing. But I think that the frustration for volunteers predominantly has come from like, especially speaking very candidly, like if I am going to put thousands and thousands of hours and time and money into this project for all, I hope the right reasons, like I try and be honest about this, but then it's not value, but it's actually sort of, what's the word, sabotaged along the way. One of the biggest things that I'm sure you'll all come across, if not already in your professional career, especially when you're in something like the careers you're in, where they're projects and they need to be completed for them to be a success. When people promise things or say they can do things and they don't follow through and you don't find that out until it's too late, to me, that's like number one, not okay. Tell me up front you can't do something and I'll find someone else that can. But if you tell me the day before, when we were counting on you to turn up, like that's sort of what Ronnell and I experienced last week in this situation. And it's a number one trigger for me because we could avoid it. So that happened too many times with the mission. And like I said, I really don't think it was an ego thing, but it's in a healthy way. It kind of was. It was like, yo, I need to take this part of me and go put it in another project that we can move forward on our social goals. Because to continue to show up to the mission and keep planting plants that die, who am I actually trying to feel good about? My IG account? Like, is that what this is for? Or is this actually to forward a social mission of creating a system of agriculture? Because that's only going to happen if everybody's on the table with us. So, or at the table. So I think anybody like that I brought or my own experience, that was the frustration, Joshua, is just like, we just only need you to meet us halfway. Like just meet us halfway and we'll do the rest. And I'm really hoping with this new plan to really bolster the roof and to do this a little bit more professionally, there will be some more accountability. That's my hope. And heck, now that Ronnell's involved, look out, world.
Yes. Well, I really appreciate the insight that you're providing and the benefits of having these amazing landscape designs, architectures work on this is really their expertise of like building out a context and framework for what needs to be considered for a successful Sky Farm, California Native Garden, right? And all of those components, then it's an opportunity for LA Mission to decide if they're ready for that investment, ready for that build out, right?
Yeah.
And having this strategic proposal that the students will be developing this year with some visuals to communicate what a Sky Farm garden could look like at the LA Mission on their rooftop, it's going to then allow folks to then decide, okay, where will money come from? How will this be sustainable? But even with how we're thinking of the life cycle of a garden, you know, some of the gardens don't grow into their, you know, adult age until the end of the first year, second or third year, right? And what does maintenance look like to ensure that that even happens? And to your point, Georgia, are we, you know, are we building a site that's just going to die, right? Those are decisions that the LA Mission has to, you know, decide. But again, I do believe the way that we're approaching it, with preparing a design proposal, gives them the ability to then align it to funding opportunities, align it to strategic partnerships, and address a lot of challenges that seem to have come up in previous iterations. So I'm really excited about like even the experiences that we've had during this time, because it speaks to some of those areas of opportunities, some of those touch points of like, oh, this needs to be thought through. Maybe they don't have a lens for, you know, some of these considerations, how it relates to some of the permit requirements that they may have to do. And the students this semester are learning about constraints, environmental constraints, design constraints, economic constraints, right? And so how do you build out a consideration for those things to ensure that the proposal is feasible and is properly invested in to achieve the most optimal outcome?
And on that note, I will share a few things that probably will be more helpful than anything I've said so far. When you're thinking about design constraints and with the towers, here's just a few things I'll throw at you all. I hope you're not like, oh my God, this lady will just stop talking. I'm totally turned off. But sun-wise, there's not too much sun ever. Like in the summer, these plants grow faster. In the winter, they grow slower. Now, one of the things that we have in our back pocket, which is so helpful, right, is when we talk about life cycles, if we put a seedling in 28 days later, on average, that thing is on the table with a tower. So you've got a much faster turnaround life cycle. You can create so many more opportunities for food production with an aeroponic tower. It also uses 95% less water than a standard garden. So like, these are the things we consider, but we need, if we're building this for functionality and sustainability, we need to be thinking about how do we make sure that the electric doesn't trip? Because when that turns off, like if those towers don't get water for more than a day, those plants are like, it's usually on a cycle of like 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off as a pretty average. And maybe we'll have a couple of hours where it's down completely, but water runs through the tower, drips through the little casings and gives enough nutrients. And that will last for about a week before you need to refill the reservoir. So how do we make sure that the electric doesn't turn those timers off? How do we get easy access to the timers to check them? If there is a, flooring, make sure those are accessible. Make sure that it's easy to access the connection points for any extensions, any extension hoses. You don't want to have to pull up the entire ground to check for a hose leak, right? Like, what are the constraints we're putting around there? Like, what are the measures that we're putting to make sure that's possible? Wind is an issue. So we can only go so high with these towers. We would go to 28 plants, which I think is a 6-foot tower, 6 foot off the top of the reservoir. So in total, it's like a 7.5-foot tower, I think is what you were experiencing. There's 8-footers and 9-footers. It's just not workable on the rooftop. That wind is too powerful. Also, birds will help themselves to those plants as much as they want. So we've tried to do different things to try and keep birds off, marigold, all with the bugs and all that sort of stuff. Birds will help themselves quite often. We found that the top rung or the bottom rung would be a lot smaller because they could get to those quite easy. So I think you want to consider that. You want to consider the maintenance of pumps. So quite often people are pretty keen to like lock in those reservoirs and build them into something, but you need to be able to lift up the reservoirs and check pumps and all that kind of stuff. So they need to be really easily accessible. I can send you lists of plants that work in the towers if that is ever going to be helpful, because some things don't work. We certainly were able to keep like growing cucumbers and squash and all that kind of thing, but not at a like very productive level. Whereas like green onions, you could provide all of Los Angeles downtown with green onions from what we had at that. Like they grow like wildfire, and you can chop them off and they regrow. So you don't pay again for the seedlings. So those are some of the things that you do not have to be concerned about weather in many ways. Because even if it rains a whole heap, that's just a bonus. So there you go.
Any other questions coming up for folks? I don't see anything in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, or type in the chat. I do see some thank yous in the chat, Georgia.
My pleasure, honestly. Thank you for reminding me why I love this so much. We need those reminders once in a while.
Actually, really quick,
Yeah.
you mentioned power washing. What were they power washing on the roofs again for?
Well, the sad thing is we actually have two theories. Sandeep has a different one, but they were just trying to clean the ground. He actually thinks, because this has happened a little bit, that some angry people wanted to cause problem to the garden. We did have that problem at some point, where they were using soapy chemicals and like, toxic chemicals, power washing on purpose. But a lot of the power washing that gets done at the mission is using like a pretty toxic-y like soap. You can't use that on the roof. You should only be using water or like a vinegar and water solution to clean it out. And they were using something that was getting in the, like it was just spraying enough onto the plants and spraying enough onto the reservoir that it was going into the water and just basically creating the whole thing as mush. So if you're going to, we said that you just should avoid power washing in general. You can wash and broom, the water. It shouldn't be something you need to power wash, especially now with all the concerns they have around the water and the pooling. But I'm curious what they sort of have going on there. But there was a time when there was a bit of infighting within the men in the mission, and Harold, who was looking after the farm, was the target of that. So we had a theory that maybe in fact they were doing it on purpose, unfortunately.
One of the things that Sandeep brought up is technology and leveraging technology for like remote access to the site. You mentioned not really always knowing what's happening onto the site. And so he also mentioned the idea of just dreaming big, right? And you mentioned that today too. And that's some alignment there. And so with you all students, I want you all to just be mindful of when we're thinking of some of these challenges, you all can dream as big as you want to on how those can be addressed in your site designs, right? Can it be addressed through technology? Can it be addressed through retrofitting a grading scale so that there's a flat ground and level ground, right? So all of those opportunities exist in your imagination and can be built out through your design projects this semester. So I definitely want to just thank you again, Georgia, for joining us this evening.
Pleasure.
I'll open it up for one more opportunity for questions.
And I
also
wanted to
feel free to let me know if I can share your contact information.
That's what I was going to say, that maybe as you're getting into it more, they'll be like, hang on, maybe that lady with a strange accent might actually know the answer to this. I am more than welcome. I am more than welcome. I am more than happy. You are more than welcome. It's been a long day. To reach out and ask.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Everybody, please give Georgia a round of applause. Share your gratitude, your hearts. And yes, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Georgia.
Always there, Ronnell, your family. And
Yeah.
by the way, your background, it's so bizarre. The mural I did at Hollywood and Sunset and Highland is like almost the same in a mural. So we are so connected.
Yes, we are. Forever, Georgia.
I love that. Okay.
It's been such a pleasure. Thanks for sharing space with us this evening. And I'll be reaching out to you soon. We're overdue for coffee.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Right.
No
Talk
stairs, wherever it is for now.
I can't believe that happened to you, Georgia. I'm hoping you heal fast.
Thank you.
That, you know, someone is taking care of you right now like you take care of everybody else.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll have to go dial someone up for it. Thank you, Christian, and thank you, everybody. Bye.
So, did y'all enjoy that? Was it insightful? You think it's gonna help with your projects? Thumbs up. Yep. Okay, I see a thumb. Okay, a couple of thumbs. Awesome. Okay, I see some thumbs. All right, let's go ahead and take another 5-minute break, and then we'll go ahead and finish off our lecture. We probably won't be able to get through everything today because of time, but I do want to go over some updates with you all and go through a couple of more of these slides. So let's come back at 8:15. All right, so we are back. We are back. We are back. I hope you all enjoyed our guest this evening. Georgia, again, is a great colleague and friend, as well as mentor of mine. Again, the insight provided really speaks to the collective impact, right? Component, and how do you manage stakeholder interest and challenges across, the stakeholders that are engaged in a project. And not all stakeholders are going to have the same interest. And so as a landscape architect, oftentimes you're navigating competing interests. One of the things that is really great to highlight in regards to this experience is the importance of landscape design, right? And having a comprehensive process that has all of the considerations built out. And that's one of the reasons why, this course exists, and helping you all develop a comprehensive proposal that may not always be visual. You'll sometimes have to write it up. You'll sometimes have to communicate in a narrative form to stakeholders why you made the considerations you made for your design, right? And so I'm really excited about how you all are receiving a lot of this information and responding to it. Right now, I want to talk to you all about our site visit. We had our site visit this Saturday. There were 9 of you all that attended. Again, the videos, pictures, and things are being uploaded to the Google Drive for you all to have access to. But I am going to pick on some of the folks that were there. What were your first impressions when you arrived at the Skid Row Sky Farm project visit? And how did it differ from other landscape projects you participated in? So I'm going to go to Kyle.
When I first got there was not very many plants and it was really dirty. So usually other projects are like in parks already and stuff like that, not in like the middle of the city.
Thank you for sharing that, Kyle. What about you, Amma?
Yeah. I think this project is, we can say, unique to me because I see the need of the people. It's not just like making a park. This is more like a special because we have to think also in all these people that are trying to get better, and it's so difficult to them to be in that place that it doesn't have any green space. But I was so glad that Georgia, she gives me a lot of motivation just to listen to her, and the way she talks is just, I think there is hope, a lot of hope for them. And I'm proud that I'm gonna be part of that help for them.
Awesome. I'm going to stay with you a little bit, Alma. I'm going to ask you, describe the different stakeholders that were represented during the tour and what insights did they provide? And Georgia can be a part of that.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. So describe the different stakeholders that were represented during the tour and what insights did they provide, right? So we spoke to staff, we spoke to residents, and we also spoke to community partners like Georgia who collaborate with making the Sky Farm project a success, right? So thinking of those different stakeholders, describe them, we've talked about different groups of stakeholders in previous lectures. So talk about the different groups of stakeholders represented, and then what insight did you receive from them?
Well, the insights that I received from them is they have different perspectives. For example, Georgia, I know she helps a lot to get the money and not get all the things going on. But I remember that the guys that were upstairs there, they just want like a space. I mean, uh, it's totally different like view of the place. But at the end, they all wants the same thing.
Thanks for sharing that, Alma. Hugo, what's coming to mind for you in regards to the same question? The different stakeholders that were represented and the insight that you received from them.
For me, it was like I like the there was like no holding back. It was just like this is what it is. It's like we're not, and it's very like relatable to like each other. That's like we're not perfect. We've come from like different backgrounds. It's like I feel like sometimes like um society doesn't give them a second chance, and it's like they find new life like amongst like the program, amongst like each other, like how like they said it's like I think the first guy that talked to us, that he said it's like, yeah, I could have gone back to like my ex's house and just like probably like just going about like my business, but it's like I think he said it was like divinely guided, that like he felt like he belonged there, and it like people are just like driven to like I like how passionate people were that like we want a garden because like we want to take care of it, like, and it's like I feel like it like compared to like other projects, it's just like oh, it's like I mean a garden could help maybe. It's like I don't know if it's like we're actually gonna use it, but these are people's like we actually want this, we need this, we it's a place where it's like they go to, like they want to feel safe, they want to feel like they actually belong, and it's like kind of like we also went to like I think the week before that it was uh I can't remember if it was like the week before that I went to the Magic Johnson park, and it said it's like there wasn't like that much graffiti, and it's like and I was kind of blown away because it's like sometimes it's like people mistreat the area, and like the thing that like really stood out is like why is it like not messed up, and it's because it's like people like if you ask people of like okay what is it that you want, and it's like getting people's input of like okay like what is it that you guys want because it's for you, it's like it's not for anyone else, and it's like people are going to take care of it because it's like it's going to belong to them, and it's like that's kind of like how like like my approach of like what is it that you guys want, and it's like if you give them what they want, it's a sense of belonging, and it's like it's for them, and they feel like it's like it's their property, so it's like they're going to be taking care of the areas.
Right, right. You create that sense of belonging as well as ownership, right? And so someone owns a project because they participated in building it out, they're less likely to deface it, right? And I appreciate you giving that example. Aranda, would you like to go ahead and share? I want to ask you, what were some of the challenges that were observed when touring the site, and how are you thinking to address it in your proposal?
Like all over, I think. I was the first part, the where the fences are, where the entrance was to the parking lot, and she mentioned rodents being a problem. So definitely having to think of a plant palette to um deal with those that wildlife that's there. That was one of them, the one of the first ones that I could think of. And then when we went to the front towards like the street side, There was a lot of noise pollution. There was a lot of not enough separation of space, and it just felt like a lot going on. And I feel like we could design to create separation of space and kind of have a transition between the streets and going into the mission. And then that's when, well, after that, we went to the rooftop, and there's a problem about the roof caving in. So one of the challenges was to not have as much weight. And yeah, we had different ideas for that, I think, too. Yeah, just kind of one of the challenges was trying to, well, I think is to design a space where it could have people come together, but also something they were looking for was a space that could be more peaceful as well. So it's kind of like trying to balance all of that out. And obviously the main focus is the garden. So it's like, how are we going to create a space together, but also a space for individuals to go relax, but having an emphasis on the garden.
Now I know you didn't join us for this past trip, but I believe you joined us for our last trip to Skid Row. So just reflecting on some of the conversation shared by Georgia, your classmates, and some of the pictures you're seeing. When you reflect on your last visit, what's coming to mind for you in relation to challenges that can be addressed through a landscape intervention? Awesome. Now he's going to type his answer. Joshua, can I go to you to ask you that same question?
Sorry, can you repeat again?
What are the challenges that you observed during our visit, and what's coming up for you as far as a landscape intervention to address it?
Probably one thing that did come out, especially with the rooftop, was because of its well, in terms of its climate change, there was, especially during excessive raining, a lot of pools of water building up on the roof. I guess there was like some, you say, I mean, there was like very few things to kind of channel it out of the roof, that from all that excessive water weight. I think I've heard too that there was some instance where the rooftop actually collapsed, and like even even when we were up there too, I did kind of feel how a little bit unstable it was with all the shaking going on in my feet. And I guess for like one design intervention maybe I had in mind was mm, probably I'll have to mm, sorry, I'm still trying to think about this. I mean, because I think with the even with the rain gutters, or I guess maybe I have to do something with the rain gutters, or like even maybe creating little um yeah, sorry, I have a straight answer to this yet, but maybe I
I
have to.
pick up a good point. The water, right? Doing something to capture the water in a more efficient way. That was also in a way to reroute the water that's captured into the watering system, right? Whether that's some of that non pollutant solution power washing that needs to happen. Or instead of using any chemicals, just use the water that's being rerouted, or just watering of the plants. So that's a great example of trying to incorporate a design component as a way to address the water issues that are happening on the rooftop.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So we're waiting for Naomi's answer in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and let you know that for this week, you only need to worry about the response to these questions and the response to your lecture questions, right? Besides that, I want you all to catch up, right? So folks have expressed some challenges just dealing with the semester. That's totally understandable. I definitely empathize with that. So for this week, I want you to focus on your site visit questions. For those that did not attend the site visit, make sure that you watch the videos, take the pictures, get insight from your classmates' responses, but you definitely want to get those points. And then also respond to your lecture questions as well. I will be posting the video for Skid Row from a previous class so that you all have a an understanding of the Skid Row experience for additional context, as well as you'll be able to use the lecture for these other responses. So with that being said, I'm just going to show the video. Okay, Nawi, thank you so much. Okay, thank you. Okay, cool. So Nawi, considering that our site is in a rooftop garden, the garden butterfly garden was in a residential area, and both are in urban settings. Always have sufficient planting is always important because a design intervention for multiple problems and constraints that exist in one place. Planting crops can yield consistent and diverse food produce. Still writing, but I accidentally hit send. Okay, cool deal. We'll wait for the additional context, but that's a great response so far. So, yeah, so I don't need to go into any of these photos because we talked in great detail with Georgia about them, and then your classmates just provided some insight from the questions. But definitely take a look at those pictures in the file and respond to them. So when we're talking about the context of the site and some of the challenges that our work is going to be addressing, we talked about the need for produce. We know that Los Angeles is very food insecure, and people experiencing homelessness oftentimes represent the most food insecure households or individuals. So with that being said, over 2 million folks are insecure in the city and county of Los Angeles. This is a big disparity that, again, is overrepresented in the Skid Row community. And this project is going to go to address the lack of access to healthy food options. Another big challenge that is faced in communities like Skid Row is that there are oftentimes more liquor stores than grocery stores. So in communities like South LA, there are over 119 liquor stores, while there are only 91 grocery stores for 800,000 residents. Compared to West LA, there are a substantial amount more grocery stores in comparison to the population. So although South LA has a larger population and it has more dense communities, it has less grocery stores than West LA. Another thing that has come up is economic opportunity, right? There's a lot of economic constraints as far as how a project is going to be funded, but a big part of driving that conversation could be how can the project generate income? And so if, for example, you're proposing the use of the site for farmers markets and things of that nature, events that folks can table and pay a tabling fee, these can be ways that you can develop an economic opportunity within your landscape design. So you can create space, event space on your site for those type of initiatives. So this right here is speaking to some of the food access options and resources. We know that LA Mission receives a lot of donated food. And this is an example of, let's say, a way that we can, one, connect the dots on existing resources that they can take advantage of and know where those locations and resources are at. We also can create a situation where this site is now a part of this infrastructure because it's a place where it's generating income, right? And so within this food and secure place of Skid Row, folks are now able to access healthy food options and they can be added to the food access research, right? And so this is a food security dashboard that was built in partnership with many stakeholders in the County of Los Angeles. The Los Angeles Food Policy Council is an organization that I used to be a policy manager for. And so this is one of the efforts and initiatives of the food dashboard. And so what it does is it accounts for not only food access points, but it also identifies nurseries. It identifies community gardens, locations within the city of Los Angeles that have school gardens, right? Locations within the county that have school gardens. And so mapping these green spaces is really critical, especially in communities that are green space poor. They need to know where their green space access points. And so when we're thinking about, for example, establishing a wildlife habitat, we're also addressing the social determinants of health. And so the components that are being addressed within the context of this site project are definitely aligned to infrastructure that's being built to, again, account for where these sites are located. So when you're thinking about your project, think of it in regards to how it will exist in the landscape, how it would exist amongst these existing conversations. So opportunities and tactics for change, right? We're talking about addressing the social determinants of health. In Los Angeles, there are over 50,000 people who are experiencing homelessness. Although the number is going down, there's still a disproportionate amount of African Americans experiencing homelessness. However, there is a growing population of Latinos experiencing homelessness. So in this county of Los Angeles, Latinos are the fastest growing group of people experiencing homelessness. And there are several task forces to address these disparate impact realities. Right now, the county is doing work to address Black people experiencing homelessness. And again, they recently have started a task force to address the growing numbers of Latinos experiencing homelessness. With that being said, when they are addressing these issues, LA Mission and other housing programs similar to it become the first step to getting people off the street. So the project you all are supporting is definitely going to enhance the individual's capacity to stay housed because of the mental stability, the environment that we're imposing with the proposals could potentially have on them. And so when we're thinking about creating these type of spaces, we're thinking about opportunities for change, right? Identify design practices that facilitate historical harm impacting social, academic, economic, health, and environmental outcomes. Those are the opportunities for change. So when we're on a site and we're seeing that they don't have any green space, that's an example of the facilitation of that historical harm. We have to reintroduce native flora and fauna to the ecosystem through landscape interventions. For example, our goal to enhance this site with a California native component to the garden design. We also need to advocate for equitable distribution of land access and housing, something that was brought up from Monique, our tour guide and a very great colleague and friend of mine, who's really doing some amazing work at the LA Mission. She mentioned our Indigenous brothers and sisters in non-binary communities. And so with that being said, we have to ensure that our advocacy is aligned to their vision of how we should be using land or accessing it. We need to reclaim green space and provide opportunities for BIPOC communities to grow produce for sustenance and economic opportunity. This site could be a great opportunity not only to generate income for the LA mission, but if we find, say the proposal is so dynamic and now funders are like, wow, this actually can be funded to support workforce development for green jobs, because this is a comprehensive model, because we do need people who can monitor the water flow and the sun usage and all of these different things that can be paid economic opportunities. We can create space for a monthly farmers market that's open to the community, so folks know not only what's happening at LA Mission, but they actually can participate in the regenerative economy opportunities that exist. And lastly, leveraging permaculture design principles through funding and policy to invest in landscape interventions. Now, a lot of these conversations get very wonky sometimes. They get very complex. And that's one of the primary reasons why I'm introducing to you all these frameworks, so that you have a better way to process the information and do it in a way that hopefully will eventually become second nature, or at least you can say, you know what, let me go back to that tool and see how the conversation fits within it. Because again, conversations will not be less complex as you get older, as you get more into your career. More than likely, they will become more complex. And so again, leveraging these frameworks so that you can take in the information and then figure out how best to use it within the context of your role for the collective impact outcome, right? And so with that being said, this week, you want to use all of the lectures that you've done up until this point, as well as all the keywords that have been provided, and catch up. You want to catch up. Catching up is really important. I think I did all of that without showing my screen, but it's okay. The information was provided, and I'll make sure you all have this lecture. But I was speaking I was speaking about it through this. So I talked about Los Angeles County being food insecure, having more liquor stores, opportunities for economic regenerative economies on sites, and why that's important, particularly for people of color and also the people experiencing homelessness. Infrastructure that is being developed so that it's easier to be aware of where existing green space exists within the city and county of Los Angeles. And again, we talked about making the site a certified wildlife habitat. We want to engage these platforms so that they know what's happening on Skid Row. I recommend that the LA Mission engage these platforms so that they know, especially if they fund this project. I talked about the disproportionate representation of Black and Latino people experiencing homelessness, and then the opportunities for change, right? Again, these conversations do get complex, so the frameworks that you all are being introduced to help streamline these conversations and make them more tangible for, communication, as well as how to incorporate them into your design considerations. So that brings us to the end of our class today. Make sure you take advantage of these next 2 weeks to catch up on your assignments. We will not have class next Monday. Next Monday is Indigenous Peoples Day. The 9th, October 9th, will be recognized as Indigenous Peoples Day. So again, take advantage of this week. Respond to your lecture questions as well as your site visit questions, but catch up to your assignments. When we come back on the 16th, I will assign our next reading assignment. So we so far have had 2. So you want to be wrapping up those projects, turning in your PowerPoints or your Adobe Express, whatever medium that you're doing, but definitely turn in those assignments. take advantage of these next 2 weeks and catch up to your assignments. Does that sound good for everybody? Taking advantage of these 2 weeks to catch up? Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay, all right. Some people are appreciative of that. All right, cool deal. All right, okay, well, with that being said, that ends our class for the evening. Folks who need to stay on to talk, feel free to do so, but I will not keep you any longer.